Hello! Today I'm going to show you how to make this cute little star coaster using your scrap fabric. For supplies, you will need 3 different fabrics, 1 for the back piece and 2 for the front, and then you will also need your pins and matching thread. Pick 2 fabrics that you would like to be on the front of the coaster and cut out 4 pieces of each in the star coaster pattern shape, and you should end up with 4 of each color. Then take the backing piece and measure an 8.5 by 8.5 square and cut that out of your backing fabric. And then take that square and you'll want to cut it in half. So measure 4 1/4 and cut right down the middle. Next, you're going to take the 8 diamond shapes that you cut out and line them up color A with color B, right sides together. Sew the diamonds together using a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, making sure that the same color is always on top. Now you should have 4 pieces and take those over to your ironing board and iron that seam right down the middle and then line them up opposite colors touching once again, and just make sure that you're really lining up that center seam for a nice clean finish. And take them over to the machine again and sew at 3/8 inch seam allowance. Now you should have 2 pieces and you're going to give those another good press with the seam flat open and trim that excess seam allowance and then line up those 2 center seams and sew again at 3/8 of an inch. Now the front of your star coaster is complete and you'll just want to give that another good press to make sure that it's nice and flat. Now it's time to assemble the back. So you're going to take those 2 halves of the square that you cut earlier and sew them again with 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, leaving a 1.5 to 2 inch gap in the middle so that we can turn that inside out later. Once you finish sewing that up, you're going to press the seam allowance open once again, which will make it easier for us to hand sew that gap when we're ready. With right sides together, line up those middle seams of both the front of the star and the back piece and pin those together so that it doesn't shift while you're sewing. Now you'll want to edge stitch all the way around the star, and I'm doing this just by putting my needle down and lifting my presser foot and turning the work itself so that I can get really close to those edges and make a nice clean line. Now it's time to trim the excess fabric, so you will go around just cutting anything extra from that backing square that we had left, and then you're going to cut notches into the side, and this will just allow the seam to lay a little bit nicer. So continue notching all the way around and you should have something like this, looking a little bit like a snowflake, and then you're just going to turn that inside out and start pushing out those corners. And something I find helpful when I'm trying to push out the corners is just taking the blunt end of scissors and pushing those up, being gentle so that you don't push through the fabric, and then roll it between your fingers until you have that nice point. Once all of the corners are turned out and nice and crisp, you can go over with your iron and just straighten out any wrinkles, just making sure that it's good and flat. Using a ladder stitch, stitch the 2 inch gap closed that we left earlier. Now that our star is almost complete, you can take it back over to your machine and edge stitch all the way around for a professional finish. And there you have it. Our star coaster is finished. You can find this free pattern on my website, and I will link that below. Thank you so much for watching, and happy scrap busting.